All right, so I think they've stopped.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
So I just really roughly put down the blue of the sky first, and uh, you know, this painting, there's a lot of darks in it, so I don't even need to be that careful with the blue because I'm going to cover up a lot of it. This
Yeah.
is a redwood tree in California. It's a picture that I took in August, and I just loved the perspective. This is actually a much wider picture. I cropped it so that it would fit in 9 by 12 dimension. So I'm just fanning it a little bit so that we can, um, the paper will dry. Right now it's lifted up, it's kind of buckling. So I just want it to go down a little bit. When the paper is buckled this much, it's difficult to control the other paints that you might put on because the raised surfaces, it'll just make the paints pool.
Hmm. Why did you put the green and the gray in the tray?
Sorry?
Why did you put the green and the gray in the tray first?
Why did I put paint in the tray?
The green and the gray.
Oh, why did I do this first?
Yeah.
I just, those are my go-to greens, and I just was checking to make sure that they would work for this, and I think they will.
I see.
It's a sap green that I usually use for like the lighter values of grass and leaves. And then this green here is the Paraline green. I always use it for like it's easy to show like the dark side of a bush or a tree.
Hmm.
It's cooler. It has some blue in it, so it just naturally is cooler and darker also.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start going with the sap green. I'm going to show all the lighter parts, do all the lighter parts of the trees here. So where there's blue actually peeking through the greens, probably the best thing to do is to actually put the paint on to the dry paper so that, or actually, yeah, if you want a hard edge so that the blue of the sky will peek through, it's better to use just the wet paint onto the dry paper. But I could also wet just the white just so I can get coverage faster. So maybe what I'll do is I'll wet the white part and at least make sure that gets covered with the green. Because a lot of this green will actually be covered up later in darks, I'm not trying to be too careful about where I actually put this, especially like where I'm getting into the dark areas here or the shadows. Um, I'm actually just covering. I'm treating I'm treating the light color as an initial layer over a lot of the surface. Um, so it's it's okay to like just be pretty liberal about where the green goes, even if it's going to get covered up later. A lot of times it's better to have at least a layer of another color underneath, so that it's not just the white of the paper showing through. And again, you see it, the green where it overlaps with the blue, it kind of has a, you know, pleasing mix of green and blue there. I kind of like that because it's not such a hard separation. Even though, you know, we know that the leaves against the sky, it's a pretty hard edge. But I like the effect of the blue light kind of bleeding into the edges of the green. And I see another area over here on the left side that I'm gonna just put a little bit more green on, light green. Yeah.
You seem to paint with that particular brush a lot. I think I might get myself some brushes like that. They'll send me a link or something.
Sorry, you're breaking up. I couldn't really understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear me. I'll email you. I noticed you use that brush a lot, and I think I might get myself a couple.
Oh, okay. Get yourself a couple of the brushes. Yeah.
Yeah, if you send me just a link or what it's called.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'm also paying attention to the values here. The lightest part in this picture, to me, it's kind of a competition between the sky and also the very top of the trunk here before it hits, you know, out of the shadow. It's a pretty bright value in the trunk. I dare say, I mean, it's not brighter than the sky, but it's you know, actually, it may actually be brighter in the picture. So it's something to keep in mind. So I'm just going to kind of roughly indicate the edge here of the shadow that I want to cover with a dark color. All right, so again, this is wet, so it's buckling up a little bit. I may actually start going in with the darks because I'm looking at the flattest part of the paper that's not buckled is the part that some of the darks can go in. So I'm just gonna grab a napkin here. I'm gonna clean off my dish here with the blue. I don't need the blue anymore. I'm gonna make a puddle of the Payne's Gray. And here, you know, I want it pretty dark, so I'm not going to do like wet on wet, I'm gonna do wet on dry. Well, the paper, yeah, the paper is dry there. I'm gonna do wet on dry because I want it pretty saturated. So let's see how this works. This is a fun one because you can be really almost abstract with it and still get the effect, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I gravitated towards, I like images like this because I like the contrast. I think it's fun. I mean, beautiful and fun. You know, I'm also always thinking in the back of my mind, oh, maybe this would be something fun to paint. And I frequently gravitate towards things that have like pretty high contrast.
When you're composing the photograph, you think that could be fun to paint?
What?
When you're composing the photograph, you think that could be fun to paint?
Yeah. I'm actually going to leave the top of the trunk white. Let's see how that works. This I may want to actually lay down some water on the trunk first. And that's just so I can get get greater coverage and have, because there's elements here where it's not a hard edge, hard shadows. And if you wet the whole surface, it's a little easier to manipulate those spots. Yeah, so I'm gonna, you see when you put wet on wet, you end up having to like do another layer afterwards because it's just never as saturated. So I'm gonna have to wait for that to dry a little bit, or I could actually, as long as I don't introduce too much more water, I can add more pigment to this. And you can still kind of play around with the area without damaging it. But I'm gonna let that rest now. I'm gonna move on here. This is also the kind of painting that I would have considered doing it using gouache on black paper, which you've seen my other paintings. I love, I kind of love, you know, doing that reverse technique of bringing lighted surfaces out of the dark. So this could have been also a fun one to do on black paper. So there's a lot of opportunities here to like actually use the paint to draw, right? To really put the shapes down. And then you see the whole right side of that image. It's just like a big mass of dark, dark leaves silhouetted against the sky. Some techniques there would be to, go to the heart, look at the big clumps of dark and go into the heart of each of those clumps. Just put them down like with a few big strokes, and then use a smaller brush or just the edge of your brush to like bring out all the finer details, like the leaves that are sticking out against the blue, on top of the blue. So again, I'm gonna do pretty wet on dry here so I can get a pretty rich bunch of clumps here. It's going to be like that. Leaving enough space for the sky to show through. So it's pretty fun. It's, and I can use the edge, the very point of the brush, to get smaller details like some of these leaves. I may just actually do that with this brush. So yeah, it's pretty neat. I can use this brush for large, like blobby bits of paint, and also like little leaves. So it's pretty fun. So yeah, I have the blobs down, which like are the darkest area, the masses, and I'm just going along the edges of those to bring out the foliage, make it a little bit less blobby. You have to keep that kind of wet. Hint at a branch here and there. Make the dark areas join each other. So like the dark areas over here, they join with some of the dark areas over here. There's some subtlety in this picture that's hard to capture, like the trees that are a little further away. So sometimes you have to just prioritize and decide, okay, what am I going to focus on? I'm not going to try too hard to like show the trees down here as like, I think if I get the colors down, it's enough. The scale of this tree probably indicates well enough that the trees down here are a bit a ways. So one other thing I'm thinking about here is, there's a lot of subtle gradations in this crown that makes up the top of the tree, and I'm going to try to capture some of that. There are some, I feel like there's some yellow ochres or hints of the fall in the leaves at the top. So I'm just going to do a little bit of my yellow ochre here, which is kind of my go-to also for showing some of the browns. Just to give a little bit of warmth and variety up here. Not a lot. Pretty dry brush. I'm going to go back in with my darks and try to blend those edges in a little bit better, because it's high up, so it's far away. We shouldn't see really hard edges from down here. So when you get rid of the hard edges, it helps make something recede into the background or recede further away. So that helps convince us that it's what the scale is.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
So you can probably tell I like to work with like negative space, and I think it's fun because the viewer fills in some of the picture in their mind, and you're just hinting at what's there. And it actually makes our job a little bit easier as a painter. I've actually been wanting to do this picture for a long time, and so I'm glad this is an opportunity to do it and just try to work on it. It actually was a little intimidating thinking about this one, but I realized I don't usually do like trees that much, so this is kind of a good intermediate opportunity, I guess. Trees can be fun if it's, for me at least, if it's the right kind of composition. And I would encourage you, actually, Mac, there's a book. It's about landscape painting, and it's by John F. Carlson, Carlsen, and it's pretty insightful. It's like from the 1950s, 60s, and yeah, a lot of principles in there that are just like eye-opening.
Thank you.
it's in the context of oil painting, but still resonates with watercolor. Yeah, so you can see part of the challenge with watercolor is because it's transparent. There are certain things you need to do to like. There's certain things you can do to make it more opaque, like just making sure your pigment to water ratio is higher. And so like with this Payne's gray, you can see even with the Payne's gray, it's the white of the paper is still showing through. And there's only so much you can do to kind of counteract that. But I feel like it's a good choice in color to bring out the darks, and as long as you don't have a lot of other white showing through unintentionally, it gives the intended effect in terms of like communicating like this whole area is in shadow. And so right here is another unintended area of white that I want to cover up because it kind of draws the eye towards it in an unintended way. So it's just an example of like how you can touch up, how you can kind of just pay attention to being consistent throughout the picture. Okay, the trunk I need to make that darker.
This is that challenge between transparency and opacity.
Sorry?
This is illustrating that challenge between transparency and opacity.
Yeah, for sure. Another trick here is to not work at don't work at a section too much, like don't work it over and over again, because when you work it over and over, you're basically you're lifting off the paint, and it's better to work in layers, let it dry, and then do another layer on top of it, which will make it darker naturally. I think I'm okay with the trunk being the white of the paper up here. I think, yeah, I'm gonna let that be. I see some, on the left side here, I see some foliage and maybe an opportunity to just like throw in some of the yellow ochre to just give some variation in terms of Um, yeah. It's pretty subtle, but, and then once that dries, I'll drop in some green actually on top of that. Going to put in some of the perylene green on this side over here, because I'm now noticing areas where that, you know, could be a little bit cooler and darker, but on the green side still. And again, this perylene green, it's just easy to like indicate dark green areas, like the undersides or the shadowy side. Gonna add the Payne's gray to the green here. I want to try to, you know, really make this more of a you know, make the head of the tree kind of a little bit more, what's the word, spherical, I guess, coming out from the trunk. And we can do that by, you know, making the gradation, blending in the dark areas down here, but making sure that the underside of it, you know, which is the least exposed to the sun, actually is like pretty dark. So I'm seeing that this part really isn't that bright in the picture, so I'm going to cover that up a little bit, but I'm going to lift off. Same as down here. I'm going to just blend that in. And I'm going to lift off there. There's a shadow there that kind of could be a nice little touch to bring in there. And you know, the paper is wet, so that it's my dry brush will be, or sorry, my wet brush, it'll diffuse a little bit once it settles.
Francis, could you say more about creating the spherical? You're talking about blending and making it darker where on the other side. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So if you look at, if we could see the tree from the side angle, right, we would see that there's probably a big, like, kind of a round crown at the top, like a broccoli, the head of a broccoli. So, you know, if you put let's take this for example. Sorry, that has water in it, so I'm not going to tip that over. Let me see if I can get. Maybe hard to see, but so the top of, if this is the top of the tree, we want to make sure. This is not a good example. I'm sorry.
You can just show me on the painting.
Yeah, like, you know, the bottom of, if it's a ball, right? Pretend the top of the tree is a ball. The bottom of it, like a sphere, when you draw a sphere, right? The bottom of it is going to be very dark. And it's not a hard edge though, right? So if you zoom out from the tree, you're going to see gradations in the tree, from bottom to top. So
gradations of value.
Yeah, so, we're gonna, let me do it here. So we have the shape of a tree, right? Naturally, it's going to be brighter on the top, okay? Now, the shadows, right? The shadows are produced if the sun is like pretty high up, like almost noon. The shadows are going to be here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see the dark area as it goes up. It's not a hard line. It should. When you're close to it, it might look like a hard edge, because if you're close to the leaf, you'll see that, the leaf obviously has a top and a bottom, and the bottom will be dark. But as you go further away, if you look at it from 300 feet away, all of those leaves are kind of like pixels. Each pixel is light or dark, but taken as a whole, it'll look like a gradation. It'll look like a gradation from bottom to top. So we're seeing in this photo, we're seeing it from the bottom, right?
Yep.
So seeing it from the bottom, we're going to see more of this dark area, but we will also see how the dark area gets lighter and lighter as it goes up, depending on the shape of the crown here. But clearly from the photo, the darkest areas are like here. So yeah, I think it's getting closer to the effect I want. Yeah, my paper is pretty raised here, so I'm not going to go over that trunk again right now. But there's certain lines on the trunk I think I'm going to try to just lift up. The other thing that's kind of useful is, the shape of the trunk and the direction of the wood, the grain, or whatever you call the bark. When you're painting an object, it's useful to keep the actual surface of that object in mind. So painting in the same direction as if you're like mimicking the bark, the verticalness of the bark, can help with sort of realistically conveying what that object is. for me, I like indicating or hinting at branches just with like partial lines. You know, we don't have to show like the entire branch. You just show a piece of it and people understand. And it makes sense, right? Because branches get covered up and obscured. Yeah, I hope this is a fun one for you to watch. I feel like it's a good there's a lot of good little lessons in this one. And compositionally it's pretty simple actually, or straightforward. But there's a lot of little techniques that it's a good opportunity to practice, right? Like hard edges versus soft edges. Negative space.
Is the negative space like what you did with the light on the trunk at the top? Is that an example of negative space?
Oh yeah, totally. Like I'm painting around it to hint at it, right? I see some areas I'm just going to try to make a little bit darker.
Yeah, you were talking about how it was straightforward compositionally, but offered a lot of sort of skills around negative space and
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as trees go, this is like for me, it's a more interesting composition to capture because it's not like a typical view. And that's partly why I was drawn to it. I mean, also that's why I went to go see these trees, but yeah, I like trying to capture. As a painter, I like to try to capture views that may not be typical. Yeah, and you can see like certain areas here where like the leaves against the background of the sky, you know, those are flat 2D objects, so there's not going to be much gradation as you go from the bottom of the leaf to the top of the leaf, like the side that's on the opposite side of us. But the canopy over here on the left, you can see, you know, it's probably kind of a thicker mass from bottom to top, and you can see how the very, very bottom that faces us is almost pure black, but then you can kind of see through and see how there are other parts of it that are exposed to the light. And so, you know, if you can convey the dimensionality of it, the contours, you know, that it's kind of rounded towards the bottom, right, by making the center of it as dark as possible, and then as it comes out, it's exposed to some light. So, you know, it's just one of those things like you just have to practice painting three-dimensional objects and getting a sense of how the light behaves, you know, as the surface is going away from you, as it's going above you. Clouds are also hard, and I would say harder for me because we're not used to seeing the tops of clouds. And but by the same token, you could actually you can view clouds as just like three-dimensional objects that are in the sky. Yeah, I think I'm a pretty good stopping point here.
It was good. That was very helpful, Francis. Doing landscapes like I like to do, there are a lot of helpful lessons here.
Yeah, I figured it seemed like that may be like a passion of yours, right? Like, so that's also why I picked this one for today. Thought it might interest you, because especially you were working on trees and the sky, right, and foliage in the one you showed me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is real helpful. I can see why it'd be a challenge. This would be something that I would avoid.
Oh yeah.
Like I just feel like it would be so hard, but it's fun to watch you try it.
I feel like I've grown in confidence over the years to get to this point where I felt ready to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely would have been something I would have been scared of a few years ago more. But yeah, this was a fun one, I think. Awesome.
It was cool. I like you said that you could just be more abstract.
Yeah. And there's just a few things in here that you want to tease out as like, some lines in terms of like the trunk, the negative space that we paint, like the dark areas. You just have enough definition and it will adequately convey what the subject matter is. Everything else is like basically blurry. It's the way you see things in real life too. It's like all of this stuff is on the periphery of your vision, right?